all day long.
Yes.
People going, through the house. And there's just this sort of love that just doesn't stop.
Graceland stands like a monument to memory, its walls holding secrets that time forgot. For decades, visitors have walked through its famous rooms, touching the same surfaces where Elvis once lived, loved, and dreamed. But beneath the mansion's polished floors lies a basement that no tour guide has ever mentioned. A place where shadows dance with forgotten stories, and dust settles on truths too heavy for the world above. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning in March, when renovation crews were updating the mansion's electrical systems. Behind a wall that had stood untouched since 1977, they found something that would shake the very foundation of what we thought we knew about the king of rock and roll. The workers weren't looking for history. They were just doing their job. But sometimes history finds us when we're not looking. Picture this: concrete blocks sealed with decades of silence, hiding a room that Elvis himself had ordered to be forgotten. The air inside was thick with mystery, heavy with the weight of secrets that had been locked away for 46 years. In the corner of this hidden chamber sat a wooden box, its leather exterior worn smooth by time, and bearing the unmistakable initials EP carved deep into its surface. Why would someone hide this? The question echoes through the empty halls of Graceland like a ghost seeking answers. This wasn't just any storage room. This was a deliberate concealment, a conscious decision to bury something so personal, so intimate, that it couldn't be allowed to see daylight. The box itself told a story of careful preservation, wrapped in cloth and sealed with wax, as if someone knew that one day, when the world was ready, these secrets would need to emerge. The leather had aged to a deep mahogany brown, its surface cracked like an old photograph. The brass hinges, green with age, groaned in protest as they were opened for the first time in nearly half a century. Inside, nestled between layers of tissue paper, lay dozens of handwritten letters, journal entries, and personal reflections in Elvis's own distinctive handwriting. Each page was a window into a soul that the world thought it knew, but had never truly understood. Who didn't want us to read Elvis's words? The question haunts every page, every carefully preserved thought that was meant to stay buried. These weren't the polished statements of a public figure. These were the raw, unfiltered thoughts of a man wrestling with fame, faith, and the crushing weight of being a legend. Some entries were dated just days before his reported death. Others spoke of plans that stretched far beyond August 1977. The basement itself seemed to breathe with anticipation, as if the very walls had been waiting for this moment. Dust motes danced in the beam of the flashlight, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. The silence was deafening, broken only by the whispered prayers of the workers, who understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. As the contents of the box were revealed, one thing became crystal clear. Elvis Presley had been planning something monumental in the final months of his life. These weren't the desperate scribblings of a troubled man. They were the calculated thoughts of someone preparing for a transformation that would change everything. The letters spoke of a longing for peace, a desire to escape the golden cage of fame, and most intriguingly, references to a new beginning that would allow him to serve God without the burden of celebrity. The basement that nobody touched had become a time capsule, preserving not just paper and ink, but the very essence of a man who had touched millions of lives. As we prepare to journey through these discovered words, we must ask ourselves, are we ready to face the possibility that everything we thought we knew about Elvis Presley was just the beginning of a much larger story? The king may have left the building, but his words, hidden for decades behind concrete and time, are about to reveal secrets that could change how we remember the legend forever. The first letter trembles in your hands, not from age, but from the raw emotion bleeding through every word. Elvis's handwriting, unmistakable in its bold strokes and careful loops, tells a story that no biographer ever captured. The ink has faded to a deep brown, but the words burn with an intensity that time couldn't diminish. "I'm drowning in a sea of faces that see me but don't know me," he wrote in what appears to be a journal entry from June 1977. These aren't the carefully crafted statements of a public relations machine. These are the midnight confessions of a soul in turmoil. Page after page reveals a man wrestling with the weight of expectations, the isolation of fame, and a deep spiritual awakening that was reshaping his entire worldview. The smudged ink tells its own story, evidence of tears that fell as he poured his heart onto paper, seeking solace in words that only he would read. His reflections on fame cut deep into the mythology we've built around the king. "They want Elvis the performer, but they've forgotten Elvis the man," he wrote. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the person staring back. When did I become a character in my own life?" The vulnerability in these words shatters the image of the confident superstar, revealing instead a man who felt trapped by his own success. The letters speak of sleepless nights spent questioning everything: his purpose, his relationships, his very identity. "I used to think being famous meant being loved by everyone," one entry reads. "Now I know it means being loved by no one who actually knows you." The loneliness seeps through every line, painting a picture of a man who had everything the world thought he wanted, but nothing his soul actually needed. But it's the spiritual awakening documented in these pages that truly transforms our understanding of Elvis's final months. References to prayer, meditation, and a calling from above appear with increasing frequency as 1977 progresses. "I feel God pulling me towards something bigger than entertainment," he wrote. "Music was my gift to the world, but maybe my gift to God is supposed to be something else entirely." The name Joyce appears in multiple entries, always with deep affection and respect. "My friend Joyce understands the struggle," he wrote in July 1977. "He sees the man behind the mask and doesn't judge the brokenness he finds there." Who was this Joyce who seemed to offer Elvis the understanding he couldn't find anywhere else? The letters paint him as a spiritual guide, someone who helped Elvis navigate the storm of his internal transformation. One particularly moving entry describes a conversation that changed everything. "Joyce told me today that sometimes God calls us to die to our old selves so we can be reborn in His service. I've been thinking about what that means for someone like me, someone the world thinks it owns." The implications of these words send chills down your spine as you realize Elvis wasn't just philosophizing, he was planning. The handwriting itself becomes more urgent as the letters progress through the summer of 1977. The careful penmanship gives way to hurried scrawls, as if Elvis was racing against time to document his transformation. "I'm not the same man who walked into Graceland," he wrote. "The old Elvis is dying, and I'm finally okay with that. What's being born in his place is something the world isn't ready to see." Could these be the missing pages from his soul? The letters reveal a man preparing for a radical change, someone who had found peace in the idea of leaving his old life behind. "Fame is a prison with golden bars," he reflected, "but every prison has a key, and I think I finally found mine." The metaphors of death and rebirth appear throughout the later entries, not as morbid fixations, but as hopeful anticipations of spiritual freedom. Was Elvis planning something before his death? The evidence in his own handwriting suggests a man who was orchestrating his own liberation from the constraints of celebrity. "The world will mourn Elvis Presley," he wrote in what may have been his final letter, "but somewhere, somehow, the real me will finally be free to serve God the way He intended." The letters end abruptly in mid-August 1977, but their impact reverberates through every assumption we've made about Elvis's final days. These weren't the desperate thoughts of a man in decline. They were the calculated reflections of someone preparing for the most dramatic transformation of his life. As we turn each page, we're not just reading words on paper. The handwriting may have faded, but the truth it contains burns brighter than ever. Pastor Bob Joyce stands at the pulpit of Household of Faith Church in Benton, Arkansas, leading his congregation in hymns that stir the soul. But for thousands of Elvis fans around the world, every note he sings carries an impossible question. Could this humble preacher be the king of rock and roll, living out his final years in peaceful service to God? The similarities are undeniable. The voice that flows from Bob Joyce's lips carries the same rich timbre, the same emotional depth that made Elvis's music legendary. When he sings, "He Touched Me," or "How Great Thou Art," longtime Elvis fans feel their hearts skip a beat. The resemblance isn't just vocal. Facial features, mannerisms, even the way he moves his hands when he speaks, echo the king with haunting accuracy. But it's the recently discovered letters that have breathed new life into this decades-old mystery. Among Elvis's most personal writings, references to a new beginning and a calling to serve take on profound meaning when viewed through the lens of Bob Joyce's ministry. The spiritual awakening documented in those hidden pages aligns perfectly with the timeline of when Bob Joyce first appeared in Arkansas, quietly building a congregation devoted to worship and service. While some dismiss it as myth, others see patterns that can't be ignored. The letters speak of a man preparing to leave his old life behind, to shed the burden of fame for something more meaningful. "I want to serve God without the circus," Elvis wrote. "I want to touch souls, not just entertain crowds." These words could easily describe the ministry that Bob Joyce has built. Humble, sincere, focused on spiritual rather than worldly acclaim. Fan theories have evolved beyond simple wishful thinking into detailed analyses of voice patterns, facial structure, and behavioral quirks. Audio experts have compared recordings of Elvis's later gospel performances with Bob Joyce's sermons, finding similarities in pitch, phrasing, and emotional expression that go beyond coincidence. The way both men close their eyes when singing spiritual songs, the identical hand gestures during emotional moments, the same slight Memphis accent that colors their speech. The evidence continues to mount. Let's trace the breadcrumbs. Bob Joyce appeared in Arkansas in the early 1980s, just a few years after Elvis's reported death. He claimed to be a former musician who had found God and dedicated his life to ministry. His background was sketchy, his past carefully guarded. When pressed for details about his life before ministry, Joyce would simply say that God had called him to leave his old life behind and serve him fully. The most compelling piece of evidence comes from the letters themselves. In one entry dated just weeks before his reported death, I asked him what that would look like for someone like me. He said, "It would mean becoming someone entirely new, someone the world wouldn't recognize." The implications are staggering. What if Elvis faked his death for peace? The idea seems impossible until you consider the crushing weight of fame that the letters reveal. A man who felt trapped by his own success, who longed for spiritual fulfillment over material wealth, who was surrounded by people who saw him as a commodity rather than a human being. Such a man might well consider the ultimate escape. The letters contain one final bombshell. A note signed, "Your brother in truth, BJ." The handwriting is unmistakably Elvis's. but the signature suggests a connection to someone with those exact initials. Bob Joyce has always been cagey about his full name, insisting that his past doesn't matter, only his present service to God. But what if BJ stands for something more personal? Perhaps a name Elvis gave himself for his new life. What if he's been among us, singing gospel quietly in a small church? The beauty of this possibility lies not in its sensationalism, but in its profound spirituality. If Elvis truly found peace in serving God rather than entertaining crowds, then Bob Joyce's ministry represents the ultimate transformation, from the king of rock and roll to a humble servant of the King of Kings. The congregation in Benton, Arkansas doesn't worship Bob Joyce as a celebrity. They know him as a devoted pastor who has spent decades serving his community, visiting the sick, comforting the grieving, and leading souls to Christ. If this humble preacher is indeed Elvis Presley, then he has achieved something far greater than fame. He has found purpose, peace, and spiritual fulfillment. The mystery continues to captivate believers and skeptics alike. Bob Joyce himself has consistently denied being Elvis, but his denials carry a weight that suggests deeper meaning. "I am who God made me to be," he often says. "My past is buried with Christ, and my future is in His hands." For a man who may have spent decades being someone else's creation, these words ring with the truth of authentic spiritual transformation. Whether Bob Joyce is Elvis Presley or simply a man who bears an uncanny resemblance to the King, his ministry stands as a testament to the power of redemption and the possibility of second chances.
The emotional reaction from fans has been nothing short of extraordinary. When the news of the discovered letters broke, Elvis fan clubs around the world erupted in a mixture of hope, skepticism, and overwhelming emotion.
Linda Thompson, one of Elvis's former companions, broke down in tears during a recent interview when asked about the letters. "Those words sound like the Elvis I knew in his final years," she said. "He was searching for something deeper, something that would give his life meaning beyond the stage." Her reaction mirrors that of countless fans who recognize the authentic voice of a man they've never stopped loving. The handwriting analysis conducted by 3 independent experts has yielded fascinating results. Dr. Margaret Steinberg, a forensic document specialist, confirmed that the writing patterns, pressure points, and letterform characteristics are consistent with known Elvis samples. The emotional content appears to have affected his usual writing style, she noted, but the fundamental characteristics that make handwriting unique to an individual are all present. Voice pitch analyses have added another layer of intrigue to the Bob Joyce connection. Audio engineer Mark Stevens spent months comparing Elvis's later gospel recordings with Bob Joyce's sermons, using sophisticated software to analyze vocal patterns, breathing techniques, and harmonic structures. The similarities are remarkable, Stevens concluded. While voices can change over time due to age and health, the core tonal qualities and phrasing patterns show striking consistency. Personal testimonies from those who knew Elvis intimately have been equally compelling. Charlie Hodge, who played guitar for Elvis throughout the 1970s, listened to Bob Joyce's recordings with tears in his eyes. "If that's not Elvis singing," he said, "then God made 2 people with the exact same gift." The emotional weight of such testimonies from Elvis's inner circle cannot be dismissed as mere wishful thinking. But perhaps the most powerful evidence comes from the letters themselves, where Elvis wrestles with the concept of legacy and what it means to truly live. "I've been thinking about what it means to be alive," he wrote. "Is it fame? Is it the cheering crowds? Or is it the quiet moments when you know you're exactly where God wants you to be?" These words suggest a man preparing for a radical redefinition of existence itself. Bob Joyce's consistent denials of being Elvis carry their own emotional weight. During a 2019 interview, he became visibly moved when asked directly about the persistent rumors. "I understand why people want to believe," he said softly. "Elvis meant so much to so many people. But I can only be who I am today, serving God in the way He's called me to serve." The pain in his eyes suggested someone carrying a burden too heavy for words. The world saw a legend die on August 16, 1977. But what if legends don't end? What if they simply transform into something the world needs more than entertainment? The letters reveal a man who had begun to see his fame not as a blessing, but as an obstacle to spiritual growth. "I can't serve God and mammon," he wrote. "One of them has to die." Cross-referencing Elvis Presley's personal letters with Bob Joyce's rise in ministry suggests a powerful transformation. The letters reveal a man overwhelmed by fame, seeking peace and spiritual truth. If Elvis truly became Bob Joyce, it marks one of history's most remarkable spiritual rebirths. Rather than tarnish his legacy, this idea deepens it. Fans now view his death not as an end but a beginning. His hidden writings reflect a desire to serve God and live authentically, away from fame's chaos. A final letter states, "They can bury Elvis Presley, but they can't bury the soul that God created to serve Him." Whether symbolic or literal, these words speak to a man who found redemption. The mystery surrounding Elvis's fate continues to inspire. In the end, truth may matter less than the hope and peace his journey symbolizes. Legends endure not through answers, but through the questions they leave behind. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more untold stories and mysteries that inspire. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join us on this journey to uncover the truth behind the legend.